Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're trying our podcast, thank you for listening to something new this week, or whenever, which is today. I will reiterate, Ben,
today is part of a week. I just want to...
Yeah. I don't know if they've been listening to the show all week long.
No, I hope
or just
not.
Today.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
But if you did, welcome.
Ben, you're an authentic automotive journalist. Isn't that true?
Authentic in what sense?
In that you really do what you say you're doing.
Sure. I mean, don't most people do what they say they do?
No. On the internet, anybody can be anything.
I guess that's true.
But we actually have the links to back it up, so you can actually tell people where to find your latest work.
Yeah, nothing says authentic like internet links.
On an audio medium.
You can find my work at Motor Trend, at Capital One Auto Navigator, and at Inside Hook. Let's go with those three for today.
And you can find my work at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Capital One's Auto Navigator as well. What's going on, Ben? What's on your plate lately?
What's on my plate is I recently drove a car that I was excited about because it kind of seemed like the company that built it was trying to... Just 1 second, Sammy. I'm going to close my window because it is blowing onto the microphone. Give me 1 second. Please entertain listeners while this happens.
But Ben is talking about an automaker that has kind of unlocked their electrification strategy and has really delivered some pretty impressive vehicles. I don't think we've been unimpressed with electric vehicles from BMW in a long time. Isn't that right?
And also, I want to point out that normally we would edit out that part about me closing the window, but since Sammy's really on an authenticity kick right now, we're going to leave that in because it's what's more authentic than closing the window to your office while recording live.
This is why the sponsors are banging at our doors.
Yeah, authenticity sells ads.
Yeah, exactly.
So as Sammy hinted at, or perhaps didn't hint at so much as come out and say it outright, I drove a BMW, and it is a vehicle that is replacing two other BMWs, and I was curious as to whether it could actually do that, because the car in question is the 550e xDrive, which is all new for 2025. I mean, the 5 Series has been redesigned, but the 550e didn't exist before this year. There's no exact predecessor to this car, Sammy. There are kind of two, I would say, ancestors that inspired it. There was a 530e that you could get. I don't know if it was available last year, but it came out around 2020, 2021. And it was a 4-cylinder turbo with a single electric motor. And it put out under 300 horsepower, I believe, and roughly the same amount of torque. And then there was the 550, the M550 xDrive.
Yeah.
Which was, I would say, the pick of the 5 Series lineup. Like, if you wanted a car that gave you 80% of the performance of an M5 at like 50% of the price, and it didn't include all of the track-only stuff that is honestly kind of a hassle on the street, especially since most people are not going to be tracking a sedan of this size. It was a really fantastic car. It was a twin turbo V8. It was extremely quick. It was very comfortable. It was fun to drive in the way that a vehicle of this size can be fun. Obviously, it's not a sports car, but if you're picking a mid-size executive sedan, it's hard to do better than that car. And it had 523 horsepower and 553 pound-feet of torque. That's significant grunt.
And a great sounding engine, if I remember correctly, too.
Of course, it was all around an excellent effort. So here comes...
It was like a budget M5. Like, it was easily as enjoyable and as cool and as well equipped as an M5, just without all the, like you mentioned, without all the track stuff. And I thought that was, if you wanted a performance car without really breaking your budget or going nuts with the budget, then the M550 was one of the coolest ones that you could pick.
I mean, it's still expensive, right? Like it's still a sub 6-figure car.
Yeah,
but it's not like a $50,000 car.
Right. But the fact that they're putting this nameplate, I suppose, this 550 nameplate on an electric vehicle, it's very modern BMW right now, right? Like,
in a way, they've swapped a vowel in for a consonant, right? Like the M is gone, the E is there. And what does that mean for this car? Well, the most important thing to consider is the absence of the M suggests that perhaps it's not an all-out performance car, period, right? Perhaps this is just a glow up for the old 530e. But then you look at the performance figures under the hood, or should I say under the chassis, because it has the electric motor too. This car has 483 horsepower and 563 pound-feet of torque.
My eyebrows raised a considerable amount when I heard those numbers.
That's 200 pound-feet more than the 530e had, and almost as much extra horsepower. So it's a huge upgrade.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But we've got to remind everyone that the new 5 Series, it's a different car. Like it not only is it a bunch of gas cars, but there's an entire electric range known as the i5 that I believe uses the same platform as the 5 Series. And as a result, I think, this vehicle is getting a little bit heavy. It needs all this horsepower to motivate it a little bit. That's my read of the situation.
I mean, that's not inaccurate, but this is a car that weighs 4,900 pounds. So that's a lot. And
that is a lot.
A big part of that weight is it has a 19 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's more than double what the 530 had. And that extra size is contributing to a curb weight that is, higher than what I would consider for a sports sedan, right? It's similar to the M5. It actually has a larger battery pack than the M5 as well, which is also a plug-in hybrid like this car. 0 to 60 though, Sammy, in this car is like 4.3 seconds.
Brilliant. That's pretty quick.
That's totally nuts. It's got the 3-liter turbocharged 6-cylinder engine that we like so much from BMW. Single electric motor and standard all-wheel drive. So you get the huge outpouring of torque right at the beginning, and you have the all-wheel drive grip to manage it, and that gives you pretty explosive acceleration off the line. However,
can I interrupt here and talk to you about this?
It's forbidden.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
We'll make it.
I don't want to knock you too far. I don't want to derail you too much.
I'm being passed a note. Apparently, it's going to be we're allowing it.
Okay, so it is such an interesting concept that they took the 530 plug-in hybrid 530e, which had a 4-cylinder, and was fairly low down the trim walk. And then bumped the plug-in hybrid version of the BMWs of the 2025s to the higher end of the range. So the M5 and this 550e seem to be the most expensive versions of a 5 Series, right?
Well, it's not so much that I guess it's the most expensive. I mean,
and we went from 4 cylinders to 6 cylinders. Like,
really,
they upgraded everything.
This is the only thing between an M car and a base 5 Series at this point.
Yeah.
Because you can get a 530 and a 540. One of those has the straight 6 and one of those is a turbo floor, and it starts at like 58,000. And then you get up US, and then you get to the 540, which is 65,000. And then you add another 10, or not even another 10. It's about $7,000 more for the 550, which is 73. And in Canada, the 550 is 84. So it's still far less than an M5. Like in the US, an M5 retails, I'm just double checking here, it's 119,000. I mean, this car is almost $50,000 cheaper than an M5. Yeah. But that's what
we said before about the M550, that it was about like half the price cheap. I mean, 50% cheaper than
what I've come to realize is this car is not a replacement for the M550.
Right.
And there's a few reasons for that. The first is the weight. It's noticeable when you are driving the car quickly. You can get a 4-wheel steering option for this vehicle. I didn't have it on my car. It activates when you're in sport mode, and I've used it on the M5. It does work quite well. With this car, the M Sport suspension is standard, I believe, for all of the 550es, and it does a pretty good job of managing body roll. But in longer corners, if you run into some upsetting aspect of asphalt, it's going to float on you a little bit. It doesn't feel as connected as maybe you'd want it to be. But the biggest issue I have with it performance-wise, I mean, obviously it's very quick almost all the time. When you're stopping, I found it very easy to overpower the regenerative brakes, and the transition from regen to, oh, we really need to stop right now braking is not smooth. I was coming downhill. I have a loop that I like to drive that has a bunch of mountain roads in it that are pretty twisty, and there's a lot of elevation changes. And I was coming down a hill to a stop sign where it kind of goes into a Y section of road, one highway to another, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to stop. I did not have that confidence in the brake pedal, and it caught me by surprise.
Okay.
So that is not something that I've experienced in any other 5 Series, at least not one that I've driven quickly.
Okay.
So those are 2 big separations. There's another aspect of the car that I think pushes it away from the M550 specifically, and that's there's no customization of drive modes, Sammy.
No way. Come on.
No, you know how like you used to be able to go in and set up all that, you could set up like a personal mode and all this crazy stuff, transmission, suspension, all of this. No, for this car, as far as I could tell, and I did some research on this, so maybe I'm wrong, universe, but you can choose between something called personal mode, which is, it's BMW speak for normal driving. It balances out engine management and suspension settings and whatever. The personal aspect, I believe, is you can set things like the interior illumination and the background of the screens and that kind of stuff, and a few other features when you go into this mode. It's under the My Mode section. So that's your normal mode. Then there's an efficient mode, which is going to try to keep you inside of, whatever fuel economy target or battery use target you want to add. And then there's a sport mode, but you don't get Sport Plus. And in sport mode, you can't change anything about it. So the only real customization in sport mode is when you choose sport mode, the transmission stays in normal shifting. You have to pull back on the little shift knob on the center console to go into sport. Yeah. So like you can choose between those 2 things. There's one other aspect of drivetrain customization that you can add to the vehicle. You can kind of choose whether you want to be a hybrid or whether you want the car to act as an EV, in the sense that it will prioritize electric-only driving over hybrid driving. It's a setting that's inside the infotainment system. It's not specifically linked to any drive mode, but it will affect, when I was in personal mode or when you're in efficient mode, you'll notice it there. I had it set to keep the EV mode going as long as possible, and it's important to recognize that, again, unlike other plug-in BMWs like the M5, there's no EV button. There's no button on the console where you can switch to hybrid mode or switch to battery only mode. It's something the car manages automatically, and you can only like kind of push it in one direction or the other. You can't say definitively this is what you want. Interesting.
Okay. That's a huge departure from BMW's usual MO of giving a lot of customization options, a lot of settings to tinker with, and give you ultimate sort of control over how your driving experience is sorted out.
And I think that's because this isn't an M car. It doesn't have the letter.
I would imagine that even maybe I've driven so many of these M Sport cars that I've forgotten what a standard non-M Sport vehicle is like. But I used to believe that there would be some sort of like that personal mode should have some more degree, like an additional layer of customization that would be useful, right?
I think that really what BMW has done with this vehicle is create a plug-in hybrid that is more efficient than the less powerful version that preceded it, so that it covers a lot more ground than that car. And like you said, they're pushing it up in terms of price and features, which when you do that, you want to be able to have a performance component to go with it, right?
That's fair.
And
yeah.
I think that's what they did. This car will
Is
go...
the efficiency really that much better? Is the efficiency that much better than the old four-cylinder model?
It offers 22 kilometers more battery driving than the 530e. And that's with a bigger motor and a heavier battery. So it'll do 55 kilometers on battery, which is just over 35 miles, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
But in reality, the regen system is so good, you will go farther than that.
You really think so? That's what you.
What do you mean? Do I really think so? I drove the car, Sammy.
But you experienced that consistently?
Yes, consistently, even at low temperatures. Do you want to know what my fuel mileage was?
Tell me.
So over the course of...
I mean, obviously I do. Were you going to say... Would you expect me to say no?
Sometimes you're combative, and I don't know. So over 558 kilometers, which included about 300 kilometers of highway-only driving, which means I was draining the battery, right? Yeah. So it was down to 0. I got 3.4 liters per 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fantastic. I'm going to I mean, converting that to miles per gallon right now.
That's considered 3 liters per 100 kilometers, like equivalent,
that's
right?
83 miles per gallon.
That's wild.
That's how much fuel consumption I used over 558 kilometers, 300 miles of driving. That's because I plugged it every time I came home. Okay. Most of my driving was done on battery locally. And then when I was out on the road, it was very efficient. I think it's like something like 9 liters per 100 combined.
Okay. That's actually pretty good. That's actually not bad. Yeah.
For a car that has nearly
500
and it has over 500 pound-feet of torque. I'm pretty impressed by that. So
okay,
if you can give me all of that, if you can give me crazy performance, really extensive battery-only driving, and and keep in mind, I'm doing this at temperatures that aren't super warm. Like it wasn't horribly winter cold, but it was around
winter
freezing.
Tires.
On winter tires, very good point. I think that's a real success for BMW. Like I would recommend this car. If
What's holding you back?
Nothing's really holding me back. I recommend it as a plug-in luxury hybrid. I think you have to be realistic about what performance really means in this vehicle. In the sense that it's going to be fast, but it's not necessarily going to be fun. And I think that's totally okay. You know, like that's not something that I don't think every executive sedan has to be a car that you would take to a racetrack. The other thing about the car, I tried out a bunch of I had a couple of complaints that weren't related to the drivetrain. One is BMW has an attention monitor on this vehicle, and I was wearing what sunglasses?
Polarized?
Yeah, polarized sunglasses. And I think the car had a really hard time with me doing that because it kept going off when I would look at stuff to the side or look at the infotainment screen. I noticed it more because I was trying to do the BMW's semi-autonomous, like adaptive cruise control. You can change lanes by just looking at the mirrors. And in the past,
by just looking at the mirrors?
So
do you have to signal first?
No, you don't have to signal. You can do that if you want, and it will change automatically. But it has a feature where if you're driving and you come up on slower traffic, it will flash a message in the head-up display that says check blind spot or check traffic beside vehicle to initiate lane change. So if you look over your shoulder or look in the mirror, and if you do that while the car is simultaneously not detecting any blind spot traffic, it will automatically change without your hands on the wheel or the clicker.
That is both the coolest thing and the least necessary thing. I love that, but I also don't need it, right? That's super cool.
What I found is it works very well for moving into the left lane. It did not work nearly as well to get back to the right lane. Perhaps a BMW feature. Eventually, it started working better for me. I don't know how. I don't know what I did to influence it, but I was impressed by it. It did work.
Okay, that is like the natural evolution of 3D gesture controls or whatever that are actually functional, right? Like head tracking instead of hand tracking.
Well, there were some gesture controls that were activated in the car that I was unaware of because every once in a while I would move my hand in a certain way and things would change. And then I went on like BMW ownership forums, and there were some people were saying like, "Oh yeah, the sport mode, I use the 2-finger point." And
the what did we used to call it? The Three Stooges.
Yeah,
the Three Stooges move.
So I mean, I get that use case. It's kind of cool. One more thing I wanted to say. I
love that. So you're like engaging warp drive, like
pretty much engage.
That's sick.
When you're on EV only, it'll do it up to 130 kilometers an hour, which I think is 80 miles an hour roughly.
Okay.
And it has 194 horsepower, just the electric motor. So it's not super fast when you're doing it. There's good torque. But I was able to, even on the up and down roads in the mountains around here, stay in battery mode almost all the time. And we've had some plug-in hybrids in the past that have not been able to do that, where they will give up going halfway up the hill and kick in the gas motor. With the 5 Series, if you want the gas motor, you have to really work for it. You have to kick down and grab it. Under normal circumstances, the car is reluctant to give it to you. So that was also an impressive part of this vehicle. I mean, overall, I think this car does what it's supposed to do. And that's a compliment in an era where cars do a whole bunch of things no one needs them to do.
Yeah, but it's such an interesting development from our experience in the last generation M550, which was also fairly positive for different reasons. And this one just has a totally different MO, right? Like it has a totally different mission. that it is accomplishing, but it's hard to distance myself from what that M550 was to what now is a plug-in hybrid luxury car.
Sammy, I need to correct something from earlier in the podcast. I was using the wrong measurement for miles per gallon. I was on a UK conversion site.
Okay.
So instead of 83 miles per gallon, the car only got 69 miles per gallon.
Okay. Oh dear.
Huge disappointment.
That's still awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a huge number.
Way to deflate the energy in the room with your fact checking. I'm glad that you found this thing to be this thing sort of like I said, it hits the brief, right? Like it managed to do exactly what it's supposed to do. It evolved the plug-in hybrid concept that the 5 Series had initiated with the previous generation. It's tough to me that they've taken that plug-in hybrid model away from the more budget-oriented buyers, but at least they've also offered so much more with the 550e.
I think that if you want a budget plug-in, you just look elsewhere in the lineup. I mean, another thing to consider with this vehicle is like the i5, as you mentioned, is out there and it's cheaper than this car. You can get an i5, the base model with 335 horsepower for 67 grand. And if you want the iDrive 40, 389 horsepower, it's 70 grand, right? So in terms of lineup, both of those are cheaper than the plug-in. So I think that the plug-in is really for people who still want the safety net of the range that the gas engine gives them.
I think people still want that, though. I'm concerned that
that's what I'm saying. That's what it's for.
Yeah, but I mean, I know that. Sorry, I'm saying I think people want that, and I think people don't want to pay this much for it, right? Like that's such an interesting.
The M version of the i5 with 593 horsepower, is 84,000. So it's 10,000 more than the plug-in.
That, if I remember correctly, you were pretty impressed with that, right?
It's an excellent car. One of my favorite EVs right now. I mean, not a mainstream electric vehicle because of the price, but one that's very impressive. It's essentially everything you like about a 5 Series with the gas engine removed. You know, there's nothing in it where you drive it and say, oh, I wish I had this. I wish I had that.
I want to continue our conversation towards some different. I want to continue our episode towards a listener question that we got emailed to us late last week. You okay with that?
This is the question from Al, correct?
Yeah, this is the question from Al. They're currently choosing between a 2025 Honda Pilot and a 2025 Mazda CX-70 or CX-90. They're replacing an older 2003 CR-V that they say is on its last legs. But they haven't pulled the trigger yet on either of these vehicles because of all of the recalls and complaints on NHTSA, or the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. So their concern is that 3 years from now, the reliability reports are going to show that these cars will be mid to low on the list, given their software and drivetrain issues. They're not sure they need a third row just yet, but it might be useful in the future. And they just want to know, like, how much weight do we put into the high recall complaints, and are these two automakers, Mazda and Honda, on the decline in reliability? Well,
it's hard. This is a problem for people like Sammy and I when we're talking about brand new cars because the data is not there.
Right.
And as Al mentions, this is in 3 years, there's going to be an actual picture painted by the data that will allow us to make a more measured evaluation of which vehicle is more reliable. That having been said, I had problems with the plug-in hybrid version of the CX-90 that I drove that were unacceptable. And whether those are related exclusively to that drivetrain or not, I don't know. The Pilot that I drove, which we talked about on last week's episode, I liked it. I would probably lean towards the Pilot because it is an older platform, one that has been around longer, and I think is better understood by Honda, whereas the CX-70 and CX-90 are brand new. You know, like this is really a ground up effort from Mazda. So in all things being equal, you would think that that's where more problems would arise.
Right.
But we don't know. A couple of things though that I did want to address. If you don't think you need a third row, then I don't think you need a third row, because most of the time in vehicles of this size, especially, the third row is not useful unless it's for very small children. So most of the people who are going to use a third row have children in their life to the point whether it's like their own family or friends who are, hanging out with their own kids. They need to put people in the back every once in a while, or they have family that visits. But this isn't these vehicles aren't of the size where you could put adults back there and go on a long trip. So I think that would be the determining factor for me is like, do you need to put children in a third row on a semi-regular basis? Otherwise, maybe look at a smaller class of vehicle, like a mid-size that's not quite as large, or even a newer compact. Like if you're coming from a 2003 CRV, then a new CRV is going to be huge and super efficient, and it might be enough for you.
I want to add one more thing that Al chose these two vehicles based on their safety ratings, and that the Mazda did better on its crash safety than the XC90 in the latest IIHS round of testing, which is pretty impressive. But I'm going to agree with Ben here. I can't recommend the CX70 or 90 based on my experience with them, which is so funny to imagine. Like, we drive these cars for maybe 1 week at a time. I think I had the CX90 or 70 for a little bit longer than that because I was doing a comparison with it, or I had it during the holidays. And it was a problematic vehicle. For us to experience those kinds of issues that quickly in a test drive, it means that regular drivers will probably have more issues.
Yeah, and this isn't a bias against Mazda, because I would be comfortable recommending a CX-5.
Oh yeah, easily. Absolutely. Or a 3, Mazda 3. I have no issues with a 3 or a CX-30.
So and these are platforms that I think Mazda just has a better handle on.
The Pilot, I have a really difficult time recommending the Pilot. I don't love the way it drives. I don't think it's really good on gas. I think its engine is a little bit, lazy feeling.
That we talked about last week. But I think it's fine. Like in a world where, if you were going to say Pilot, Subaru Ascent, Volkswagen, what's the one that you like? Atlas. I think that
Atlas is pretty good.
But I think those are all roughly equivalent. They have their strengths and weaknesses, but none of them stand out as like, oh, there's something really bad about one of these models,
Right. Absolutely.
And at the same time, nothing stands out as being amazing.
That's fair. Of these two vehicles that I was looking for, I would definitely lean towards the Pilot. But like you, I might maybe consider checking out another model. I would stay in the 3-row space. If reliability and safety is your top concerns, I mean, the Highlander is a rock solid vehicle. And then, as Ben mentioned, sometimes the cars that have been kind of steady in terms of their design and engineering, which is to say that they've used the same platform and drivetrain for a really long time, can also be pretty steady. And I would recommend the Korean automakers for that, because the Telluride and Palisade both have been riding on the same platform for a few years now. I think it's got to be 4 or 5 years, and have been really, really impressive in terms of the way they drive and handle.
There's also the wild card of the Honda Passport, which is essentially a truncated version of the Pilot. So you get almost everything about the Pilot in a smaller form that's 2-row. Fuel mileage is a little bit better. In 2025 is the final year of this generation. So it's been around, it's well understood, and you might be able to get a good discount when the 26s arrive.
That's a great point.
If they're trying to push out the older inventory. So Passport might be something to look at.
That's a great point. Absolutely. This final year of the Passport, I think that's a good idea. And then one more thing so I hope that advice helps you, Al.
Yeah, and thank you for writing in.
Yeah, we really enjoyed talking about that before we even got on the show. And one more thing I want to talk to you, Ben, is that way back in November, you wrote a very interesting story about automaker gifts that were given with certain cars.
Yeah, so mention why Sammy's bringing this up now, many months later, is because a friend of ours, Nick Marinese, wrote an article about the weirdest official car gear you could buy in 2025. And it was kind of similar because my piece was about stuff that car companies gave you, but this is stuff that you can buy from car companies. Yeah. Sammy, from this list of things that Nick put together, there were a few things that stood out to you, right? Like, what did you love the most?
Well, no, the easiest one to pick out is the Suzuki Katana pizza cutter, which is like a $25 pizza cutter in the shape of a motorcycle. I think this is the best thing here.
I have a Starship Enterprise pizza cutter like this.
Oh, right.
Where the saucer section of the Enterprise spins around.
I love that.
I love using it. From this list, isn't there an odd baby carriage?
There is. That is related with Lamborghini. It's a Silver Cross Reef.
It's $7,500 Canadian.
That's expensive.
4,000 pounds. And it's literally just a black stroller. Like it's not like, it doesn't look like a Urus or anything.
No.
It doesn't look mean. It's just very expensive. Something else that's weird though, the other thing that stood out is Nissan offers something called Smell My Dust, which is a fragrance. I hesitate to call it a perfume. It's a fragrance that you could buy that was made from bits of tire dust that were produced by the Formula E cars that Nissan was racing at the time. And they took
Not just that. Rosemary wood and sugar.
Well, also notes of Sakura cherry blossoms. Sam,
oh, yes.
Which is the flower they paint on the car itself. That sure is something.
I gotta be real with you. Formula E is the funniest. It is such a cool sport. I think it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I like it.
I think I really wish it a lot of like luck in terms of becoming a really mainstream motorsport, which I don't think it's there yet. But I love the amount of gimmicks that occur due to Formula E, and this is part of it because, why not make a perfume made from tire dust from the car? I think that's hilarious. Okay, but let's go to these bonuses that automakers were offering with your purchase.
Okay. So, the craziest one that I found when I was putting this article together is back in, I can't remember exactly when. What's the model year? 2024. So not even that long ago. If you bought something called the Land Rover Range Rover SV Orpheus Limited Edition, you got a statue in the Australian market. And
let me understand this, though. The statue doesn't come to your house, does it?
Sammy, the statue is 7 feet tall. You get a replica of an existing sculpture that is sitting underwater near the Great Barrier Reef as part of something called the Ocean Sentinels installation, which is an art installation that's really cool. I recommend you looking it up. It's 5 meters underwater, and you get this 7 foot tall statue that you can, I guess, put in your driveway or in your bedroom or in your shower. I don't know what you're going to do with it. Frankly, if you were buying this car, you might already have like an art gallery to put the statue in, because in Australia, the car costs 520,000 Australian dollars, which is 472,000 Canadian, which is, I guess, roughly 390,000 US. That is a lot of money.
That is a ton.
They only built 6 of these cars.
Well, duh. Yeah, no one, I don't know. That's only funny to me because like the 6 people, they must have come up with this idea, and the 6 people, the 6 people who were going to buy it, right?
Well, what's strange is you can actually buy one of these sculptures like without having to buy the Range Rover, right. But that's $108,000. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
The other ones that I liked in this story, I want to go to the Moto Campo. Is that okay?
Sure.
Which is the Honda City, which is a small subcompact car that was sold in Japan.
Little hatchback in the 80s.
Yeah, it came with a fold-up gas-powered scooter, which was so cool. I loved this thing so much.
So you could park like really far away from your office and then arrive at your office smelling like gas and oil.
Yes.
Carrying a hot scooter that you can fold up in the elevator, burning everyone's legs around you.
You mentioned that this is not the first time that this has happened. There was something called the the ski bob?
Yeah, so I didn't know what a ski bob was, which is felt really embarrassing considering I live in Quebec where they invented the snowmobile. But the ski bob was something that Porsche came up with. It didn't come with a car, but you could buy it from Porsche. The company was called Arova.
Okay.
And it was the 212 ski bob. So ski bobs are like snow bikes. And apparently snow bikes were a really popular thing in Europe. If you didn't want to ski, it was kind of like a stand-up scooter for skiing. And you could go down the same trails and paths that you would on alpine skis. They didn't make very many of them, but you could definitely get them from Porsche and it would fit in the frunk of a 911. And they weighed like less than 30 pounds.
That's wicked.
Yeah. Only 50 people bought it. It was available. It was available at Porsche dealerships. People just, I'm suspect that.
Well, I also love the concept that somebody's snow driving their 911 with an accessory in the front, right?
Yeah, and also like the idea that you had to first of all know that this thing existed, and also be a ski bob enthusiast.
Right.
Like this is a very small niche of Porsche buyers, I think. And the last thing from this article that I wanted to talk about is the Nissan Rogue One Star Wars Limited Edition.
That's what you're going to talk about?
It came with something called a Death Trooper helmet.
Yeah, a character that gets 6 minutes of screen time in one movie, Rogue One, which of course is the Nissan Rogue's tie-in.
Now, that's not the problem I have with the Death Trooper helmet. The last I checked, Nissan is not a military contractor. They're trying to sell this to families and normal people who probably aren't mercenaries and don't celebrate death. Like, why would you ever, if you're a company and Star Wars comes to you and says, hey, if there's anything from our universe you could use to try to help sell your car, what would it be? Like, who in that meeting is like, let's go with Death Trooper helmet?
I mean, I can see some really overhyped child getting psyched about the Death Troopers. I think that's where they get a lot of their attention. But they
could have made an R2-D2 trash can.
Yeah.
Some slug goo from Jabba the Hutt, like in a little
anything. Can. Just lightsabers.
Luke Skywalker's missing hand is probably less morbid than a Death Trooper helmet.
And for a Rogue, I mean, nothing is so like the opposite of Death Trooper, like the Nissan Rogue,
Where
right?
Are you putting this helmet after you buy your Trooper?
I agree, I don't think it's usable.
Well, of course not.
It's not like a comic. Like we can just assemble the rest of my Comic-Con outfit.
It's not like any of the armor in Star Wars was useful whatsoever. Everybody who got shot wearing Stormtrooper armor died instantly.
Yeah, fell over.
It was just there to make you walk awkwardly and be an easier target. Like that's pretty much. I don't know. This was back in 2017. It was a different world.
There's one more car that I was certain you were going to mention, which was the Z3 Neiman Marcus edition.
I talk about this all the time, though.
Do it one more time for me, please.
So in the 90s, everyone was excited that Pierce Brosnan was going to be James Bond. I mean,
everyone
was, because like they tried a few. They tried George Lazenby, didn't work. They tried Timothy Dalton, didn't really work. So they're like, this time for sure. And they brought an Irish guy in and they made him British. And they came out with, I think it was GoldenEye was the first one, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So Neiman Marcus is really good at celebrating meaningless milestones with products, especially luxury products. And they partnered up with BMW to make a special Z3. It was called the 007 edition, which, tracks. And it was a certain color. What was it? Bahama blue or something? I can't remember the exact name they had for the color. It's like a very light blue. And the car is only in the movie, like, very briefly. It's not really a Bond car. It doesn't have gadgets and whatnot. At least I don't remember it having gadgets. Did it have gadgets, Sammy?
I don't remember it having. It must have, though.
It must have had, like, machine guns
But
inside.
I remember people being really uncertain about, because I think, was the Z3 the first, like...
Yeah, they were like,
BMW
the Brits
run?
and the Germans, that's not good, given 007's history. Although 007 is essentially a post-war hero on the screen. Anyway, the biggest problem with this vehicle was it was at the very beginning of Z3 production, which meant that the car for like the first couple of years, it came with a 1.9 liter 4-cylinder engine that was super underwhelming. Not at all interesting to drive. You had to get a later model with the 6-cylinder for the Z3 to really be fun. But Neiman Marcus couldn't wait. So they had 100 vehicles Initially, that was the plan to sell, and there were so many people interested that they had to make 400 vehicles. They really sold a lot of these. And what was interesting, they initially planned to make like 25 of them or something like that. Then they made 100.
Okay.
The first, even though they doubled or quintupled or whatever the production was, they ended up, the first 20 people got something a little extra. Not only did they get the Neiman Marcus car, but they got to go to like a dinner with Pierce Brosnan. And they got to walk the red carpet with him to a private screening of the movie. And then they also got to go to the South Carolina plant where they were building the Z3, which is a pretty big deal because that was brand new. Yeah. That was BMW's first foray into building in North America, was the Z3. Eventually, all the SUVs were built there as well, but that hadn't happened yet in 97 or 96 or whenever this car was built. So I don't know. You bought a BMW and then you get to have like an awkward dinner with Pierce Brosnan. Yeah. It's kind of cool.
I think that's okay. I was curious about, usually to me the car. The idea of buying the car comes after I've seen the movie, and that's been the exciting thing.
No.
Go and see the movie again with the guy after I've just bought the car with him that he's been driving.
And you probably haven't even driven it, right? Because it's probably not produced.
Yeah, and then go to the factory to see it get made.
Yeah, you drive prototype versions of it at the factory too. So like you're still being teased.
Yeah. There's a lot going on with that marketing thing. I will say, it's these little like gimmicks that help me get through the day, knowing that there's an extra way to have a little bit more fun with your purchase or your purchasing decision, because there's so much going on. And I just think, if there's another way that a company can squeeze in a little bit more joy into these things, that's great.
I think
they didn't have to do that.
I think BMW should have bit down a little harder and given that dinner party to all 100 people who bought the car, and then made Pierce Brosnan go from like one table to another, like on a timer. Like there would be a ding.
Oh, I thought it'd be like a wedding, like
it's kind of like a wedding. It's kind of like a wedding, but Pierce Brosnan doesn't believe in traditional marriage, so you can't really bring that up around him. And so he just goes from one table to another and like this rapid fire questions about his life.
Imagine like the day of like, I have an appointment. I have a dentist appointment that day.
I think you cancel the dentist appointment.
You really think so?
I think so.
And you go there, you've got pain in your teeth. Pierce Brosnan's like, why is this guy sneering at me so hard? Is like,
what's interesting?
Won't say anything.
What's interesting about this dinner party is like Pierce Brosnan had not been James Bond yet, right? Like this is the first time. So you can't even really ask him anything about the movie that you haven't seen, right? Yeah. So it's not like, everyone now knows that he was James Bond, but like in the 90s it was still fresh and new. The only thing you probably knew him from was Remington Steele, which is like his long-running TV show. I also think that, I might be wrong here, Pierce Brosnan might have been in the running to be Indiana Jones back in the day, but don't quote me on that. I think Remington Steele might have interfered with that. Oh no, sorry, I'm completely wrong. What I want to say is they wanted Brosnan for the role earlier, to replace Dalton earlier, but Remington Steele interfered with that. He didn't want to go from his detective TV show to being Bond right away. There was no way to make it work properly. So Dalton kind of filled in.
Gotcha.
That's my understanding.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That was this week's episode of the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. If you want to get more, I recommend you head on over to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. While you're there, you'll see all of our previous episodes. You'll see photos of the cars that we've been driving, and you'll see links to some of the stories that we've written about the cars. But more important than all of that is the ability to send us a note, just like Al did earlier. All you need to do is click on the contact button on our site, and you fill out the form. It lands in our inbox, and we generally talk about it and then bring it up on the next episode. If that's too much for you, I recommend just going to your email client and emailing Benjamin at benjaminhunting.com. And that is another way to get in touch with us. And finally, if you really want to, I recommend you take a look at our social media profiles. You can find Benjamin and me on Instagram. Ben is at huntingbenjamin, and I'm at Sammy_ha. Ben is also available on Blue Sky at huntingbenjamin. And I'm there, Sammy-ha, like you're laughing.
So confusing. So confusing.
Ben, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, I'm going to be talking about the Genesis G80. And I know I talked about the electrified version late last year, but this time it's the gas model. And I'm surprised by how different I find the two cars.
Interesting. I'm not sure what I've got next week, actually.
My goodness. You had
I'll tell you about it when we do it.
One job, and it was to know what you're driving next week.
Oopsies. Anyways, thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk next week.
Bye.
Bye.
And I watched Collateral as my birthday movie.
Good movie.
Yeah, it's my favorite Michael Mann movie.
I love the concept of Tom. I think Tom Cruise played a bad guy really, really, really well. So bizarre that he hasn't done it again. Has he?
I don't know.
Not really.
I mean, like a murderous villain?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Maybe he doesn't get a lot of good villains sent his way.
Do you think he really cares?
What do you mean?
Maybe he does. About what he's doing?
Oh, yeah. So how much do you know about his career?
Not anything anymore.
So starting in the late 80s, when he became a huge star, he specifically sought out the best directors that he wanted to work with and made films with each of them. So if you look at the 80s, I believe you'll see like Brian De Palma. Did he work with De Palma? He worked with Paul Thomas Anderson. He had a list that he went through of the directors that he wanted to, and there are very, very few repeats. You don't really see repeat directors until he hooks up with Christopher McQuarrie for Mission Impossible. And even before that, he had McQuarrie do rewrites on a bunch of his movies, and that's where they developed their relationship. So he's one of the rare directors Cruise has worked with more than once. So anyway, yeah, it is interesting. Although he did work with Tony Scott twice, so he did Top Gun and Days of Thunder. So he's always been very deliberate about who he collaborates with, and the older he gets, the more deliberate he becomes. Which is, I think that's cool.
That is cool, actually. Yes.
I'm not sure. I mean, he doesn't really make movies now outside of the franchises he's associated with. I can't think of the last one aside from Edge of Tomorrow. There was Edge of Tomorrow, and there was the one where he was on Earth that wasn't the real Earth. Remember that one?
Oblivion.
Yeah, which isn't a bad movie, but it did not do well.
It was a little bit convoluted. I remember watching it in theaters. And then there was The Mummy. Wasn't he in the Mummy reboot, which was not good?
But that was also supposed to be a franchise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what he's gunning for? But
it was not good.
Is that what he's gunning for? Like a franchise, a cinematic universe?
That was the dark universe that Universal was going to take all of their old school monsters.
So it's going to be The Mummy and Frankenstein?
Yeah, and like Dracula and all that.
Oh yeah, Dracula. But which Dracula? The hot Dracula?
Which Dracula?
Wasn't Tom Cruise already a hot Dracula?
No, he was Dracula-like, though. Okay, so he had a string of bad movies in a row.
A string, okay.
He had Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, The Mummy, and American Made. Back to back to back. 2016, and then the other two in 2017.
Is American Made the one where he's a smuggler? That was a dumb movie.
It was a dumb movie.
It was okay. I think it was decently shot. It was just stupid. It was a story that didn't need to be told.
I mean, he takes risks and make things that aren't good. Like Night and Day wasn't good. Valkyrie didn't do well. Obviously, Oblivion didn't do well, but it's a good movie. Jack Reacher's also a really good movie. I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I thought Jack Reacher. I don't think he was great in Jack Reacher, but I think it's a good source material.
The second one's awful. The first one's good.
But I do like that other guy that's playing him in that Alan Rickman. What's his name? I think it's shot here.
Yes, maybe. It is. So yeah, so like he hasn't had any success outside of a franchise since I think Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow is the weirdest one. It had the tail spin. The tail end made it better. People didn't like it originally, and then the more people watched it, the more they liked it. I think people liked it on budget, or on TV or something, on streaming, more than they liked it in the theater.
But since 2018, he's made 3 movies, and 2 of them were Mission Impossibles, and the other one was Top Gun.
Yeah,
so that's 7 years.
To me, Mission Impossible just seems like his Fast and the Furious. It's like, it's time for me to make some money now.
Yeah, Dead Reckoning sucked. I did not know.
I haven't watched one since MI2, I think.
Apparently, there's a rumored sequel to Edge of Tomorrow called Live, Die, Repeat, and Repeat.
Yeah, I heard that they might be making one of the streaming giants might make it, I think.
Untitled Tom Cruise / SpaceX project.
Or maybe it's All You Need Is Kill. Maybe they're using that name. Anyways, let's get started with this podcast.